into it. It's called a state of confusion. And when I say a state of confusion, I mean it on two aspects, okay? I'm talking about one, a state of confusion about perhaps who I am, because I think some people don't get that, and a state of confusion about the medical system also, and the foods that we eat and so on. And it will all kind of intertwine. It will either work very well or it won't work at all. But you don't know unless you try. So let's give it a go and we'll go have some fun with that. All right. What really, again, as I said, I'm well aware that the admins are all here ready to turn those keys both at once to ban me permanently. Don't worry, it's going to be all right. Okay. For those of you who don't know, and for those of you who do, I'm going to give you a bit more detail, all right, about me as a person. Okay. I was born in 1979. I was born on June the 27th. It was a Wednesday. I don't remember it personally. And I was born as a blue baby, which means that I had very low levels of oxygen in my blood for some reason. At the time, it was difficult to diagnose. We didn't have the tech that we have these days. And I had essentially some heart surgery performed when I was 21 months old. It was a procedure which was pioneered in 1963 by a doctor called Dr. William Mustard. So I had something called the Mustard procedure. Now, there's not that many of us around the world, but I think there's a few other people actually watching this who've got this, and because I've asked them to come along as well, quite frankly, for backup sometimes, and because it's support. And that's the power of Facebook, actually, is support in the same way that 4Networking can be. Anyway, so the condition that I was born with, prior to that procedure, prior to 1963, was the mortality rate was 100%. So if I was born prior to 63, I wouldn't be doing this morning. Some of you people would be cool with that, some wouldn't. But I'm going to be biased and say I'm very glad that I was born after that. Now, the mortality rate was still quite high. I'm pretty fortunate to be here for that reason. There's also a film about this called There's Something the Lord Made, which some of you may find very, very interesting. If anybody wants a link to it, I'll reply in the comments afterwards. But anyway, I've been through my life where I've been in and out of hospital, you know, all throughout the years and so on. I'm not going to give you a detailed description of what the actual condition is. I put that in the actual comment, the title of this. I think it comes up as when it gets shared. But essentially, I had to have an operation when I had to try to. They couldn't switch the arteries because the arteries, if you think about a child's heart, it's the size of a strawberry. You think how small the arteries are? They're like as thin as like a pencil lead. But very, very difficult procedure to do. So I've been through my life living with this condition, and for the 30 years that I can remember, I've been in hospital every year, and I go in for a checkup, and it's kind of like cardiology bingo. It's kind of like, what are you going to have? You're going to have an ECG this year, you're going to have a cardiac MRI this year, you're going to have, you know, an echocardiogram, maybe a stress test, you know, or maybe something a bit more exciting, maybe a catheterization or something. This is essentially preventative maintenance. We're looking at what's going on. There's not a lot of people around in the world that have got what I've got. So really, I'm kind of the guinea pig. I'm sort of setting the standards in some way. And one of the things that I'd noticed over the years was that people in hospitals were getting much fatter and much sicker. I'm talking about the staff and the patients. And I noticed that I started to get fatter and sicker as well. My condition started to erode, and I have made a couple of notes here. So if I look down, it's for a reason. And I was in two minds whether to just wing it or use some cue cards, and I thought, you know what, I'll probably just have a backup and just go for both. But what the thing with it is, I started to question what was going on, why was my condition getting worse, and could I do anything to change it? So I tried all the diets out there, and I tried going to the gym, and I don't have good exercise tolerance because my right ventricle is my systemic ventricle, and for most people it's the left ventricle, so my heart's actually back to front. It's a tough gig. So, you know, if there's times when I'm carrying lots and lots of stuff up to a foresight or something, I'm struggling, give us a hand. I've got genuine reason. Which kind of follows on, it's an invisible disease basically. That's it, unless you look at and see the big scar that I've got down the chest, which is kind of gone so much, not so visible now. You wouldn't know that there's a problem, apart from perhaps the way I behave online. But anyway, so I tried all these diets and all that. So for people that have tried diets and so on, I understand how difficult it is. I really, really do, because I tried all these things as well, and some had some success. They really did, but some didn't. And you know, it's a tough gig. You know, it's confusional. What do you try and do? What are you trying to eat? You know, this sort of stuff. And some stuff brought my weight down, but some didn't improve my blood work. And that was the stuff that I was interested in. I wanted to get down, particularly my cholesterol. It wasn't high; it was 3.6, which is considered low in the UK, but it's higher than I wanted it to be. I wanted to get down something called CRP, which is a marker of inflammation in the blood vessels. That's a risk that puts you at risk, essentially. There are lots of other factors, and people can dispute the facts, but you know we'll go into that in detail as we need to. I'm always going to have the cynics or seven knobheads or whatever, but that's fine. Um, so we'll go from there. But where this started to change, and I'll tell you something that I haven't shared before with you guys, and I think I want to do it, not in a cathartic way, but I think it's just going to be useful. All right, so just bear with me on this, okay? When all this changed was the 27th of March 2011. Okay, I got a phone call from my mum. It was, you know, just on my mobile, and it was like, okay, cool. You know, and I was actually sitting at home at the time. I was watching a program called Mighty Ships, which was on National Geographic in HD. You know, at the time, HD, this was amazing. You know, I'm a proper geek or nerd for people who don't really know me. So I thought, I'll phone her back afterwards. And then the house phone rang. It was my mum, and I thought, well, that's a bit strange. Normally she doesn't ring a house phone. And I answered the phone, and anybody who's ever had this type of phone call will understand exactly what I mean. And she said to me, she said, Adam, something's happened to Nigel. And Nigel was my stepfather, who was married to my mother for 21 years, very, very happy married. My father was a very senior ranking naval officer, he attained the rank of Commodore. And they've been living in the south of France since, I'd say his retirement, but actually it wasn't his retirement. He was working as director of a super yacht company called Edmiston, based out of Monaco. But my mum said, something's happened to Nigel. And I said, okay, well, what is it? You know, I thought, you know, maybe he'd fallen over or broken his arm playing tennis or something. You know, this is, and then she said, no. She said, no, it's not that. It's something a lot more serious. And I said, well, what's going on? And she said, the SMUR here, and SMUR is an acronym. It's in French for it. It's essentially a special medical unit of reanimation. We don't have that quite in the UK, but basically they send out a couple of paramedics and a doctor and so on, their ambulance and whatever. And to cut a long story short, because Forsyths we don't have a lot of time, he died instantly, just like that, while my mum was starting to make lunch. And at that point, I didn't understand what was going on. You go into when shit like this happens, you go into autopilot, and that's what happened. And I said to Gemma, who was my partner at the time, I've got a different Gemma now. I seem to keep the same names for some reason. I said to her, I said, right, go to Cash Point, rip out 500 quid off my card, get 500 quid off your card, get passports, let's go. And we did, and we just got on there and we just blasted out. I don't even remember the ferry journey. All I remember was driving from Calais to Nice in about 7 hours flat, which if you Google map how long that takes, it doesn't take 7 hours. I just absolutely fucking went for it because you have to. And I remember arriving there and talking to my mum and just giving her a massive hug and just saying, what the fuck has happened? And the collateral damage from that was huge. Yes, we'd lost one person, and it's still a tough thing to talk about. But the repatriation of getting my mum back to the UK, getting our dog back to the UK, my sister lost a year of uni, had to sell their house, all these things. I'm the only one, apart from the person who was no longer with us, who spoke French, so I had to deal with everything, mediate and so on. This was tough shit to go through. And then there was a memorial service because of his rank in the military, and I spoke at the memorial service at a place called St Anne's Chapel in the dockyard in Portsmouth when we did the repatriation. I think there must have been about 300 people in the room. There's probably 30 or 40 of them have got Wikipedia pages and been knighted and so on. I didn't care. I just said my piece and that was it. But I delivered it very well, apparently. I don't fully remember. I think I took about 30 milligrams of diazepam, quite frankly, before, just to deal with that. And you do. But once the dust had settled from that, what happened? I then started to get myself on this mission. I started to think, okay, fine, but what causes this stuff? How could somebody who had a successful career, who was slim and trim, living from the south of France eating a heart-healthy Mediterranean diet, who played tennis every day, enjoyed sailing on his yacht, a 40-foot sailing yacht, not with Richard Branson bollocks. How could somebody like that, with no prior risk symptoms, had the best health insurance, had all the screening, how could they just suddenly just drop dead? It just didn't make any sense. It made no sense to me. And I thought I knew a lot about cardiology because of my condition. But I didn't realise that some of that stuff. And so from there, I stumbled across a lot of evidence from people such as Dean Ornish. If you don't know who that is, look him up or ask me later. He brought books out in the 80s about preventing and reversing heart disease. This stuff, and I thought, okay, well, you know what, maybe I can make some difference to myself. Maybe I can do something here. You know, shit, because, you know, I'm a huge believer that out of all bad comes some good. I thought, well, you know, even selfishly, if I can help myself. So I put myself through this plan that he'd recommended, this Dr. Dean Ornish, and guess what? Yeah, okay, my weight came down. I was never particularly overweight, but I was heavier than I wanted to be. But I went back to cardiology after a year, and they said, Adam, what have you been doing? This is quite frankly remarkable. Your CRP's gone down, your weight's gone down, your cholesterol's gone down, and you've got improved heart function. And my cardiologist at the time, a lady called Dr. Ashlyn Carroll at Southampton, she said, this is unprecedented. She said, we've never seen this before in your patient group. And at that point you say, well, everything is unprecedented until it happens for the first time. It's as simple as that. Okay? So that's just confirmation bias there, and I understand that as anecdotal, just one person. So what I did is I went to one of the Facebook groups, which ironically I'm actually fucking banned from because I'm a little bit too outspoken sometimes, and some people get a little bit too, you know, the snowflaking thing. But I took a few people and said, hey, you know what? Here's what I want to do. I want to take a couple of you who, and let's see if we can, you know, let's see if we can start to maybe get the same results for you guys as I got for myself. And guess what? Same thing happened. Same thing happened. And there's a chap in this group, I don't know if he's live here because he's in New Zealand, called Ian Gervin, who some of you guys might have seen in the group. And the same thing happened to him. He went from stage 3 heart failure to stage 1 heart failure, lost a bunch of weight, got happier and healthier and so on. And that's massive. So there's a difference there between a weight loss diet and a healthy diet, and people need to understand the differences between those. And that stuff was so powerful. And when I started to really look into this in detail, I realized what actually had happened. What had actually caused my stepfather's death was my mother's cooking. And my mum is a really good cook. And I'm not just saying that because my mum, because loads of people say that. I'm saying that because she really is. I mean, she's phenomenal. Everybody says that. Everyone comments. And Adam, like, girls have dated me just like because they can have my mum's cooking. Like, no shit, I'm serious. That stuff's true. But it's amazing. And, you know, but the thing with me is I wanted bigger data. I really wanted bigger data. I wanted not just the results from me and a handful of others and from a couple of little books. And I started to see it. And then I started to look at the populations around the world where the rates of heart disease weren't the same as they were in these Western countries. And that's what started to interest me. Because then I moved from my patient group, which is a very specialist patient group, to general population, which is most of the audience here. That was where I started to get triggered. So I thought, okay, shit, right, now we've got something here. And I read things such as the China study, which some of you may come across. If you want to read it, fantastic. It's quite technical. It's a tough read. But stuff like this, when I started to get into this in a lot of detail, and you become obsessed with stuff like this, you really do the research. Then I started to understand this makes sense. So part of the reason that I'm noisy online is because I'm talking about tough diseases here. I need to be noisy. I've got to stand on tiptoes to make my message heard, because of all the shit in the marketplace. I don't say that to sound unprofessional. I say it because it's bloody true. That's what we're talking about. And also, when I post stuff like, you know, what's the weirdest sexual thing that's happened to you or something like that, I do it for a bit of fun, you know, because it's just kind of, because you've got to have fun, or what is the point, you know? It really is. You know, and then again, I hit the skeptics. They came back and, you know, oh yeah, but you know this, and all these people exercise more. And I said, yeah, you know what, it's not just diet. Obviously, you've got to move around as well and this type of stuff, you know. But then we looked at things like migrant studies where people move from one population or country to another, and they're almost exclusively acquired the diseases from the of the country they moved to. And I'm not just talking about, you know, someone moving to a country and getting a cold or getting a bit of, you know, delly belly or something like that. I'm talking about diseases that you don't see in certain parts of the world, but you see is almost rampant in the UK. I'm talking about stuff like the type 2 diabetes, the coronary artery disease, and in the younger people, the acne, and then as you get older, things like gout, multiple sclerosis, chronic fatigue syndrome, some cancers as well. I'm not professing that you can cure all of these things, but what I am saying is that diet has a huge amount of influence, and most people do not recognise that. And that is so important. And what I want people to understand with this is about preventative nutrition, not reactive action. Okay. I spoke to Brad when we were sat having lunch yesterday at the event that Ian Dixon put on, and you know, he was saying, how fucking daft was I? You know, he got the phone call, you know, oh, you're pre-diabetic, and he laughed it off. And then 6 months later or whatever it was, oh, you've got type 2 diabetes. And you look back on it and you kick yourself. Now, he's lucky he got away with it. Because for a lot of people, their first symptom's the last symptom, which is what happened to me in the case of my stepfather. And that's what's going to happen today in the UK to about 70 people who won't see it coming. So if I kick off sometimes about maybe some of the breakfast things or something like that, there's reason behind it. I'm not here to cause an argument or to cause a fight. I'm doing it because I genuinely give a shit. That's why I'm doing it. And I hope that makes sense to you, okay? And people have ridiculed me and so on, these types of things, and I get all that stuff, but we've got to be careful. This food marketing stuff is just, companies spend billions, food companies spend billions on making foods hyper palatable so that you get addicted to these foods. And I say addicted intentionally. They really, really do. And I don't have an issue with companies making money. That's the whole point of business. But when this affects people's health in this way, which it does, it's insane. And listen, if sudden death doesn't scare you enough, how about this? What about you go and live out the last 30 years of your life not being able to go to the bathroom yourself? Because that's what we're seeing at the moment on the rise. Now, I'm not going to go and walk around with the webcam and show you just behind, but there's retirement flats behind where I live. And the picture says it's all happy and smiley. The ambulance arrives 2-3 times a week. These people are not happy and smiley. Whereas you look at parts of the world where they don't have all these amazing resources and hospitals and doctors and all these great procedures that we have, and they're all happy and healthy and slim, and we've got all these amazing resources, which, don't get me wrong, I have huge reverence for the NHS. If I go out later and get in a car crash, I want the best drugs, I want the strongest drugs, the best treatments, and I want to be taken there ASAP. So it's no disrespect to the medical profession at all, but it's important. But you know, I've stuck with this, and I understand that I'm out of time. If I run over by a minute or two, I apologise. But I do this for a bigger reason than a commercial entity, and people will understand that, and people who've looked at Brad's work will understand that. Money is not the reason why I do this. People have ridiculed me in the way that they will continue to ridicule other people who do things. I have a book next to me, if any of you have read this, The Value of Believing Yourself by Louis Pasteur. If you know the story of what Louis Pasteur, everybody ridiculed him. Everybody ridiculed him. They said, you can't cure that, you can't do that. Because that was what was thought, was common knowledge. And he was maybe not so outspoken as me at the time, but maybe he would have been if he could do Facebook Live on Saturday morning. But you've got to have these reasons for these types of things, and some of these are my reasons, and hopefully that makes sense. And when we talk about things such as, you know, residual income streams and things like that, and you know, all this money in pharmaceuticals and all that, you know, when the MLM threads kick off, you know, I'm like, if you want to go and make money, don't join MLM, start selling statins. That's the money at the moment. That's where the money is in this stuff, you know. But my message here, to conclude this, is a message of empowerment. Your genes are not your fate, in most cases. And certainly not for the big diseases that kill most people here. And when I say kill most people here, I mean kill people prematurely or affect their quality of life later in life. We're all going to die, I get that. Okay, mortality rate, 100%, one per person, completely fair, no changes. But I'm not addressing this to some phantom audience. I'm not. You need to know your numbers. And if you're not comfortable with it, you need to do something about it. All right, and that's not me telling you what to do. That from a perspective of pushing, that's me saying I'm doing it because I genuinely care. Because I don't want anyone have to go through some of the stuff that I went through, and I know that people will continue to go through. And that's really why I do what I do. I put some links on the description in here. One of them is for people who are online members and in this group and they don't really know what forward networking is about. I'd advise you to have a look. I also put a link to Mark Brimpson's late wife. There's a foundation there. I think people should look at that and possibly consider donating. I think that was, I don't know the details, he will fill you in the details, but that was a result of what seems as medical negligence, which is hugely on the rise. Yeah, and I'm not just talking about what happened in his situation, but if we're looking at, if we're looking at things like bypass surgery, people now see that as normal. What they don't tell you is the stats of how many people don't make it through the actual procedure, and it's higher than you think. It's nasty. I put a link to something called the Somerville Foundation as well, which is a national charity, a small national charity, which I support for obvious reasons. I don't support organisations like Cancer Research and the British Heart Foundation because I don't quite see the cascade of funds getting to where it needs to be, but that's a long conversation. So I'll wrap this up, but really the message that I've got on this is so clear, is that don't wait until you get to that point like where Brad Burton did. Don't think just because you're slim and trim that you're protected, because that's not how it works. Okay, in this country we've got some really serious health problems, and it's going to get worse. And I say it sincerely. Again, I'll repeat it. I say it because I care about people. The banter's fine. I get it. All right, we can say all that, and I'm not going to you know, play up to the thing about the fuck it, the bacon, vegan, all that kind of jazz and all that kind of stuff. But we'll go from there. Listen, this actually has been quite difficult for me to do, believe it or not. So I'm going to end my actual foresight and we'll move on to the next part of this. But I want to say to people, thank you for joining me this morning. I really genuinely appreciate it.